Right. And so that's the big change. And so we were going to shift gears before we talk about an announcement that was made by Waynesboro Mayor Bobby Henderson. I thought, Chris, maybe you could just break that down a little bit for us. The first part of it, of course, is what you just said, the fact that in the past, if no matter which ward you lived in Waynesboro, you could still vote in all the city elections. The difference now is that, you only vote for the ward that you live in. So, but then also, Chris, so I want you to talk about that. But then the second thing is that redistricting also happens. So like in our case, we live in the neighborhood near Home Depot on Chatham Road, and we went from being in Ward D to being in Ward B. Many people in Waynesboro may have gotten a voter card in the mail and not even looked at it. But the reason that a lot of those voter cards were sent out was because districts have changed now, or wards have changed now. So again, if you did get a card in the mail, I think they came about a month ago, you might want to look to see if there have been any changes. And I know they've also posted a map on the Waynesboro website. The last time I looked, it hadn't been updated. It may have been updated now, but if you have questions about that, of course, you can call the registrar. But Chris, it sounds like there's lots of changes. The other big change, of course, is that Waynesboro used to elect its people in May. And of course, that's now shifting to November. So lots of changes in Waynesboro.
Well, Stanton as well. Stanton also did a May election up until this cycle. So, and I think that's a state law as well. So a couple of state laws impacting us locally. But yeah, I think you covered pretty well the voting ward changes. We argued with the voter registrar. No, we live in Ward D. We got these things in the mail. They're wrong. No, it turns out that the voter registrar was right, as she should have been. Yeah, the news today is that the mayor, Bobby Henderson, is not going to run for re-election. And that's news because particularly because a month ago he said he was going to run for re-election. And in fact, on May 12th, he announced he was going to run for re-election. He was elected back in 2018. It's interesting. He ran, and it felt like in 2018 he was probably going to align more with the conservative members of the city council. In Waynesboro, they're unlike in Stanton. The four who got elected in 2020 all identify as Republicans. I want to use it. They identify as Republicans. In Waynesboro, we haven't had until now this cycle. The Republican committee is nominating candidates this cycle to run for the two open seats, Ward C and D. Traditionally, it's not banned by state law or local ordinance, but traditionally candidates have run as independents. But Henderson, as an independent, seemed like, again, he was going to probably more align himself with the more conservative members of the council. It's kind of like he's like Waynesboro's John Roberts, the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, who was nominated by a Republican president and was looked at as a guy who's probably going to align with Republicans and conservative stances in court issues, and has largely not done that. Henderson has been the same way. He's actually largely aligned with the two more progressive members of the city council, Sam Hostetter and Terry Short, the former mayor. And so in that sense, it's going to be a big loss for people like us who back the progressive policies, more progressive policies. I don't want to throw out there that Waynesboro has become a progressive city, but certainly a lot more progressive than it has been for the last 15 years. He cited in his announcement that he's not going to run for re-election, that his job has gotten more intensive, and his day job, that is, he's worked for as a vice president of a fire investigative firm, and that it's just kind of it's getting too hard to balance, doing what he needs to do on his day job and then doing what he needs to do as the member of city council and the mayor. But it's curious though, Crystal. When I was pouring through his city council member Facebook page, where he had posted this announcement that he was not going to be running for re-election after having announced a month ago that he was, I found the day after his announcement that he was going to run back in May, he had engaged in a lengthy discussion with a city resident who had been critical of city council's vote, the 3-2 vote back in April, to approve Sunset Park, the $2 million project, $125,000 of city money, to build a park on the old landfill property up above the city. It was interesting. It was really insightful to read. And I would ask listeners here to maybe go to that. But, among the highlights, he just talked about how, he was elected in 2018. He wanted to work to move the city forward. And he says, why, this particular resident who raised issue on Facebook mentioned the 14 full-time openings on the city police force. And he said, why do we have 14 open positions on our police department on this Facebook post? I would agree it came from failed leadership. Unfortunately, the failed leadership started with the council back in 2007, who chose to listen to political party leadership rather than the professional leadership of the city manager. And so, it's interesting that a person who, once they decide they're not going to run for re-election, they feel like they can speak freely. You kind of wish this Bobby Henderson had spoken freely for the last 4 years. He wrote that those councils, dating back to 2007, were so proud of having cut our taxes back to one of the lowest tax rates in the state, they did not care about our city growth or our city employees. The sad truth, their following was caused by buckling to party politics. They failed to plan and invest. They failed us and future generations. And here we are living a failure to plan. So, now that, here's the guy that we thought 4 years ago was going to align with the conservatives. And now with a few months left in his term, he's outing himself as a person who wants to see the city, make progress. And it's gosh, I hate to see the guy go in that sense. Obviously he was trying to do some good things for the city.
So you said Ward C and Ward D, Sam Hostetter's seat, are up in the November election. We haven't heard from Sam yet as to whether he plans to run for re-election.
Well, this is one of those things about being reporters and editors in a this is not a small city. It's 25,000 residents, but Sam is our doctor. Full disclosure, Sam is our family doctor. And we talk with Sam on a regular basis about medical issues, but we make it a point not to talk with him about politics when we're talking about medical issues. So we've spoken with Sam, but we've not spoken with Sam about his politics, and we've not heard about his political decisions. But these decisions will have to be coming up soon. Because the ballot, I want to say it's the second Wednesday, and no, the second Wednesday would be today, though. It must be next week that the deadline would be to get on to submit your petitions with signatures and all your paperwork and everything else, and get approved by the registrar to be on the ballot. So I would expect something one way or the other, certainly within the next week.